So I'm at the train station here in Montpelier on the way to visit my friend in Rhode Island. And if you know about where trains go in this area, might be kind of surprised I'm here because this isn't really a direct route to Rhode Island. There's a lot better options. Like, why am I not at the downtown transit center where I can take Greyhound down to Boston, a single seat ride, which this isn't going to be? Well, because I'm bringing my bike and Greyhound doesn't allow bike, so I have a little bit of a complicated method because there's a lot fewer options with a bike. And, well, Greyhound leaves a little bit later than this, which in getting into Boston a little bit later than my schedule, so that isn't as desirable either. I enjoyed watching the loose leaves get thrown up and fly past the window. This being September 19th, it was the first time I really noticed the foliage starting. I think in large part because I was able to look out over the landscape and enjoy it, not something I can do when driving. The train car I was in was about 40% full, though I get the feeling the car I was in was more full than average. You might have gotten the hint that with me headed to Rhode Island via Boston, I'm not taking Amtrak the whole way, as I would get to Rhode Island first with an 8:43 p.m. arrival time into Providence being the earliest on a ticket Amtrak won't sell. Apparently they don't think 2 hours and 49 minutes is enough transfer time in New Haven. Not knowing ahead of time how the bike rack worked, I did not have my Allen key ready to lower the seat, and I would not be on here for long. Plus, a fully functional bike that I did not have to mess with would be key for the next leg of my journey. The $16 base fare to White River Junction seems on the high end of reasonable. If there were local buses, that would be a lot cheaper. But adding on the flat $20 fee for my bike for such a short, not so full, journey seems excessive. It could get to DC for the same price. The bike prices on the Northeast Regional are somewhat variable. With the train arriving 4 minutes late, which I consider undelayed, it caused me some worry as I had only 28 minutes as scheduled to bike the 5.4 miles and 300 feet up to the Lebanon bus station to catch the 12:05 Dartmouth coach, arriving to South Station at 2:25. While there are free local bus options which could connect me, they would get me on the Dartmouth coach an hour later. That bus would result in only a 13-minute connection as scheduled to my preferred train. Despite some stoplights, construction alternating traffic, and a slight wrong turn I immediately realized, I made it to the bus station at the scheduled departure time, though it was about 2 minutes to spare as the driver was using the restroom. There wasn't enough space for my bike in the cargo hold, but it took some rearranging of others' luggage, so if the bus was more than the estimated 60% full, it may not have been possible. Going into this, not having room for my bike on here was the biggest risk of this trip. A ticket on Dartmouth coach is valid for any trip in 3 months, so not knowing my exact trip, no need to get creative with refunds as I have with Amtrak. Dartmouth coach has power outlets and reasonable but inconsistent Wi-Fi, so I was able to use my computer and get stuff done online. If you book in advance, Greyhound has cheaper prices from Montpelier to Boston. However, at last minute such as the night before, it is often cheaper to take what I did to Boston. The Montpelier to White River Junction leg of Amtrak is never going to be close to capacity, so the price stays nearly the same even the day before, and the fixed fare of $35 on Dartmouth coach. I think it would have been good if Dartmouth coach, a bus whose customers are mainly those who have the option to drive and college students, had a better connection to Amtrak, particularly as Boston is the major urban center for most people in Vermont. A friend of mine told me Dartmouth coach used to stop in White River Junction, but I'm guessing that ended in the past couple years when I suspect they moved to an hourly bus schedule. Different branding in the same company, Concord Coach, works with Amtrak to sell tickets for services on some of its routes. After failing to help two blind people because I didn't know where the store they were looking for was either, I am headed out of here after a quick bathroom stop out of the bus station, headed towards a train station. I have plenty of time, so not a worry. We got in even a couple minutes early. And the drinking fountain by this bathroom was out of service, so that's another stop to get filled up on water after being pretty limited. I was only carrying one bottle with me to travel light, and there's trains. And that got drunk up almost immediately when I got on the bus because I didn't have time to fill it up at the bus station back in Lebanon. They did have some small bottles of water on the bus, but I'll do almost anything to avoid drinking from those. I can't handle the plastic taste. I've been through this station a lot, dealing with Concord Coach.
Right, of course. Diego Hartman, because the harp has 6 pedals. Not true, by the way.
And I've always felt like a little bit of a pariah from kind of the main entrance of the bus station, having to take this little stairwell after going down and then get out onto the rail platforms and have to walk quite a bit, particularly when you're rushing to try to catch the bus along here, and just kind of not a place that's intended for through travel, just getting on the trains. Like, it works okay, but just doesn't feel like your thought of connecting between. And I understand it's been built out in stages, not one grand plan. I have no blame for the people who did this, other than, well, that extra little dip down and then having to go back up. That would have been nice if that could have been avoided. I think could have been. But normally we often find taking Concord Coach in, it's a lot cheaper to fly. It's a lot cheaper to park up at Concord and take the bus, free parking, than park down at the airport. So sometimes a couple minutes late, quite frequently 10 to 15 minutes late with traffic, but we had very limited traffic today, midday. I ended up buying a ticket from a desk agent who was carrying on a conversation with her neighbor, and I don't think he even ever looked at me, though she did get me the right ticket that I asked for. She was able to do what she needed to do while carrying on that conversation. It just felt very impersonal. I would have rather used a machine if I didn't see one that seemed to be able to do it. Before getting my water bottle filled, because I didn't see any water fountains, and when I asked an information person, he was saying they'd just removed them. His suggestion was to go get some ice water from Dunkin' or Starbucks. I assumed they would charge for that, plus the waste from a cup. So instead, I went and filled it up with hot water from the bathroom and letting it air cool on my bike. But that's something that changed in the last 2 months, maybe due to renovations. There are some ongoing here. Since my dad took the bus and then the train south of here. But another thing that changed is it now looks like you need a ticket to board the commuter rail trains. Previously, when he was here, he was able to buy a ticket on board, and that's what I was counting on with that 13-minute connection. So I'm glad that I had the time to buy one ahead of time. Hopefully it wouldn't have been a problem, but I'm glad I don't have to figure that out. But I'm out here in this kind of semi-outdoor, it's a overhanging thing, but open to the elements if it was, well, cold or windy, rainy, with a number of other people waiting. They do have an indoor waiting area with a couple of kind of public feeling seats rather than the ones associated with all the little restaurant-y establishments. But these announcements seem questionably able to hear out here, but though there's that good screen for the construction of adding fare gates. But it would be a lot more crowded inside with most of the space taken up by the commercial establishments, not that those aren't being filled with people waiting presumably, than out here, which is why I'm out here given it's really nice and pleasant weather. Despite me traveling to Rhode Island, my preferred route is taking commuter rail to Fall River, Massachusetts, as my friends work there and the commuter rail train that leaves South Station at 3:38 gets me there at 5:24, shortly after they get out of work. Compared to the line to Providence, it also permits bikes during peak periods, and even if I didn't have my friends to drive me, I could have taken local buses, which would get me close to their house in the East Bay. My backup plan if I missed that train was a fully refundable Amtrak ticket on the 5:30 Northeast Regional arriving into Providence at 6:08, as by the 6:47 arrival time of the next commuter rail to Fall River, that local bus was no longer running, though ones out of Providence were. And as part of the point of this trip, I was not going to make my friends drive any extra. My ticket was never checked, so I guess I could have used it again as it is valid for 3 months. Even during rush hour traffic, the commuter rail is still slower, which I think is a real problem if trying to mode shift to public transit, though some passengers had computers out and presumably felt the time on the train was functional. With as far as I can find, a rack for only one bike for the entire train, that left a lot to be desired, and staff didn't seem to have an answer, though they did allow the awkward situations that myself and 3 others in my area of the train came up with for our bikes. I was the only one of the 4 of us able to sit. With 3+2 seating, the seats are narrower than kind of a 2+2 configuration, which resulted in people not really wanting to sit next to each other. People were standing rather than sitting next to each other. But I will say the seats do have better legroom than my experience on British trains. These cars certainly feel a little bit old, though they are still functional. And I was able to get my bike more out of the way once passengers in those seats left. But these areas, with a little bit of work, I think you can install pretty good bike rack system, but you only lose 2 seats or 4 seats over here and add a lot of capacity, which was clearly needed. A more pleasant time due to the very limited announcements as to which station was next, though without displays it would have been more worrisome if I was not going to the end of the line, plus an accessibility issue. Unlike my trip to DC this spring where the train was competitive with other modes, for this trip, given I own a car, driving would make much more sense on both a monetary and time perspective, taking maybe 4.5 hours compared to the 6.5 hours on the way down. Rather than taking 2 full days off of work for the same time with my friends, I would just need to take a couple of hours to half a day on each of the days, and given I drive a Prius, it is a very low cost per mile. Choosing public transit for this trip was a decision made to test out the public transit. A benefit I believe taking public transit gave me, and particularly my complicated multimodal route, is that the 2 days with my friends in Rhode Island felt like a real vacation, in a way it did not when I drove down last fall. Making the trip complicated put me more into vacation mode than driving. Leaving this suburban town that my friends live in, or I guess I'm still in it, first stop is grocery store to get myself some food for lunch and dinner today. Felt a little bit too much to ask them to provide it for me, since they did provide all the meals up to now. That is the one vehicle which is okay to park there. Well, I could have taken a bus into Providence. The grocery store I was at was a pretty busy bus stop. There was a bus leaving when I got there and another one leaving when I left there. I have enough time that I decided to bike in. There's a really nice bike path which takes me into Providence. It's the same bike path going the other way that I actually brought my bike on this trip for, to go on a nice ride with my friends, which was really nice and pleasant, and a nice dip in the beach at the end of it. Well, I looked at the bus schedules and I figured out that they would work, which is good. If it was raining, I probably would have been taking it if it was raining, but it's a nice day today. I'd just rather not have to figure out the schedules and make sure I got everything right. When there's the option to bike in and I have a bike, that's what I'm going to do. I appreciate the slowing of traffic on a bike route, but these appear to be leading to some erratic driving. What if there had been a car parked in that space after the speed hump? I would have needed to bike over it or go into traffic. The Providence station was under renovation, which resulted in a passage to the bathroom that was too narrow and no drinking fountain. I'm glad I can rely on Amtrak to have water. I wasn't the only one traveling with a bike. 2 other passengers had just finished a multi-day bikepacking trip. The employee behind the ticket counter unprompted gave me good instructions where to wait on the platform with my bike. With an on-time departure from Providence, we're on our way to New Haven for me, where I will transfer to the Vermonter. I could have gotten on a train which left Providence an hour later and only got to New Haven about 45 minutes later, which still would have given me an hour to get on the Vermonter. However, Amtrak wouldn't sell me a combined ticket to do that. I would have had to buy 2 separate tickets and take on the risk that if the Northeast Regional was delayed in getting to New Haven, I might not catch the Vermonter. And well, given it's 1 train a day, I really want to catch it. It's also, with the 10 o'clock departure from when my friends left for work at 8 o'clock, there's still plenty of time for me to get, the 2 hours was still plenty of time for me to get to the train station and do the grocery shopping. Is, I mean, probably an hour bike ride plus the grocery shopping. So kind of this whole trip, it's like I could be doing it faster either by this train or to kind of take the fastest way would be doing basically the reverse of the route I did coming down here, maybe going out of Providence towards Boston, maybe leaving around noon seemed to be a reasonable time, but I'm still going to get home at the exact same time because the only transit method from White River Junction to Montpelier, or really even Randolph to Montpelier, there's some buses that go from White River Junction to Randolph, is the Vermonter. So it doesn't really matter to me because I was able to leave when my friends left for work and I'm going to get home at the same time. So I'm willing to take the more kind of comfortable and just relaxed route, and with everything certain and not having to rely on connections. I don't like big windows. I actively chose the north side of the train to not be in the sun, as without shades that can get very hot, though I did miss some views. I was hoping to find a nicer place, maybe a bench in a park somewhere, but it doesn't look like there's any parks nearby. That's just a fenced off vacant lot across the street. And I didn't feel like biking too far because my front tire's a little bit flat. It's still got some air into it. Probably got a flat riding through Providence, slow leak, but I don't feel like bothering with fixing it now and all that. But I had my lunch here. I was really glad to be able to find refried beans, no mess, in a pop-top type container, because the knife multi-tool I brought my bike repair, the one I bring for like bike repair stuff, as opposed to like a Swiss Army knife, which I would bring for eating, which would have a can opener on it. This one doesn't. And using a carrot to spoon it onto the tortilla for my lunch, along with the mandarins I bought, and peanuts I bought for snacks. I wasn't the only one sitting out in this plaza. The slightly raised lamppost bases were an improvement over sitting on flat ground, but it would have been nice if there were benches. You know what this is really missing and I forgot to buy? Cheese. And it doesn't seem like there's a grocery store close enough to here for me to want to deal with that. For both lunch and dinner, this cost me under $14, though add up to $3 for the cheese, as that is what I would have preferred to make it complete. For food, I prefer eating compared to what I'd expect I would find on the train, and I had a decent amount left over. New Haven Union Station is a beautiful old station building, with much of the historic decor preserved, though with necessary improvements such as making the doors auto-operable, seeming to keep the old doors, and a big departure screen. Good Amtrak-type seating. It did have a water fountain, including a water bottle filler. With the Vermonter about 70% full when I got on in New Haven, I needed to move the luggage of others to convert to the bike rack. While I was able to talk to the owner of one piece of luggage, it felt uncomfortable to change the location of someone else's luggage without being able to let them know. And the train staff were not helpful in the way they had been on the previous two. I'm glad this was not my first time bringing a bike onto Amtrak. While Amtrak's policy around bikes is clear, you have to purchase a spot for your bike. Determining the bike policy of other transit is often a deep dive into their policies, and even if they allow bikes, often it is not completely clear, or your bike can be refused in a way that other luggage can't, though bikes do take up more space. It results in uncertainty in being able to make the planned trip. I think that it is really important to accommodate bikes. Having a bike allows much larger range of areas which can be easily accessed, not just making long connections. Having my own good quality road bike is much more beneficial for me than many a rental bike, if that's even a possibility. As we approach White River Junction, getting back on the lollipop of the trip I've made, it's been a pretty good time here on the train. It's done what I was wanting it to, which was giving me time to be on my computer, both editing video for a video that I hope to come out in under a week, and also getting some YouTube watching and catching up after a fun weekend with friends where I didn't do a ton of that. So it's generally been a pretty good journey, seeing the sunset over Vermont. Northampton, Massachusetts is where it kind of emptied out and became much less busy, and now there's just a handful of us on here as we make our way, I think pretty much on time, back into Vermont. Just a few minutes after the train left, pretty empty. There's one more passenger waiting for a ride. There were 15 of us, I think I counted, getting off at this stop. The train was more empty than when I was on it heading south on Friday at this point. But I mean, I think all of us had to drive away from here, and that's, well, the nearest bus stop is a mile away. And while it's on a path a good portion of that distance, well, the last bus in the area stops running from the downtown transit center, which is another 3/4 of a mile, half mile, at 6:30, and it's 7:45 now. So while there are buses in Montpelier, they don't run late at night, and so it's kind of difficult if you're using kind of one of the major forms of intercity transit to do anything else other than drive from here, especially because this is not downtown. It's just, well, where the through running railroad tracks are. There are rail tracks that go downtown, but that's just a spur. And it's kind of a little bit lonely here, but I'm glad to be back and headed home. Now the moment of truth. Did I manage to keep track of my car keys the entire way? Yes, I did.